Welcome back to Mile High Sports with Shawn Drotar. With me is Chris Tomasson of the Denver Gazette. You've heard him on the program before. Delighted to get to see him and talk to you in person as opposed to over the phone. We're out here live from Denver Broncos Training Camp, Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit. I'm saying that all the time because that's the only way I'm going to remember it, Chris. I have to look over and read it every single time. Dove Valley, for those of you who still remember, of course, that way of thinking about it. But the pads come on today. Obviously, all eyes are still on the quarterbacks because of Bo Nix's addition to the team, the presumption that he will be QB1, at least whether it's not on week one, the plan is for him to be the starter. How does getting into pads make that easier for Bo Nix, or does it make it harder for him because Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson, who has started more than 30 NFL games, have a little more experience in that department?
Yeah, we'll have to see if there's, first of all, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. We'll have to see if being in pads makes a big difference. But, of course, quarterbacks can't be hit during training camp anyway. So from that standpoint, maybe we'll know a little bit better if things are a sack because their guys will be banging pads to get to the quarterback, what have you. But, no, the most interesting thing, I think, Sean Payton pretty much said on Saturday that we can't go through all of training camp having a three-man battle.
Right.
He didn't say those exact words, but if he's going to change the reps, which he said he will, I imagine somebody's going to potentially fall out of the race. So it's Bo Nix's turn because they've been alternating all three guys with the first team. It's Bo Nix today, and I would imagine we'll probably get Zach Wilson again tomorrow, but the key thing will be maybe Zach Wilson's next time up, because we'll Stidham on Wednesday, Nix again Thursday. Friday, will Zach Wilson still be the guy? Will he get another shot? That'll be kind of what everybody's waiting to see, because basically if you're trying to choose a quarterback and you're dividing first-team reps among three guys, that can't go on for too long. You got to get somebody ready September 8th for Seattle. Yeah, and especially when one of them, of course, is a rookie and needs all the reps that he can get. Nix was got the first team reps on the day one, past the acclimation periods. Now gets it on the first day of pads. That's a statement, right? Well,
he's not drawing straws.
I don't know if it's necessarily a statement, because they've been going with the rotation, and the first day in front of fans was Zach Wilson. So it was kind of like, Zach Wilson in front of fans. So I don't know if I would read a tremendous amount into that. It was interesting in the spring. Zach Wilson got the least amount of reps in the practices. I think it was something like 5 for Stidham, 4 for Nix, and 3 for Wilson, because Wilson got shorted 1 late in the spring. So that was kind of interesting.
Alex Singleton made a joke about it just the last week, the idea that the Denver Broncos, and pointedly so, have a very expensive offensive line. And they do, with Garrett Bowles being the highest paid player on the team. Of course, Mike McGlinchey and Ben Powers had their contracts last year. Quinn Miners gets the extension that'll kick in a couple years, paying him roughly $20 million a year. But the center position right now is a big shrug of the shoulders, right? And so we understand how important that position is. When you look at that battle, regardless of who the quarterback is, how quickly do you want that to solidify so the quarterbacks are taking the snaps from the same guy?
Well, first of all, that's the cheap guy, and the line is the center, because obviously if the Broncos wanted to spend tons of money on
Lloyd
the center,
Cushenberry only got 12 and change, right?
Right. They could have matched the offer that Cushenberry got from Tennessee, but once they saw that offer, they said, no, thank you. But I think Luke Wattenberg has a decent hold on the center job. He's been working regularly with the first team, and I thought a couple things were interesting. Sean Payton mentioned that to get Alex Forsythe some work, he's been also doing some work at guard. And if that guy's going to be your main center, are you also going to work him at guard? So, they might have him in mind as a utility guy on the offensive line. I know he has the advantage of having snapped with Bo Nix at Oregon, but he didn't take a single snap in a regular season game last year. And I also thought it was interesting that Sean Payton was asked Saturday about the competition at center, and he said, it's a battle. Then he mentioned Wattenberg and Forsythe, never even mentioned Sam Mustipher's name. The
veteran. That's somewhat surprising for a veteran.
you would have thought that he might have had a leg up when they signed him. Of course, most of those starts were for a bad Bears team, which was doing nothing at offense during those particular years.
But a handful for
anyway,
some good Ravens teams.
I think he got 2 last year due to injury or whatever. But that was kind of interesting. But obviously, Wattenberg has been in the system 2 years. Well, Payton system 1 year, and so is Forsythe, and Mustafa just got here. So looks to me like Wattenberg's by far the leading candidate.
So when we talk about the quarterback situation, you're right. This can't keep going very long. You want to make sure it gets solidified. How long does the competition really last? Does it go into the first preseason game? Do you see enough on the practice field where Sean Payton has probably decided to maybe rule one guy out? Maybe it's Zach Wilson by Friday, as you suggested. Or does this continue to go on through all of this week and then into next week? At what point do you look at it and say, now the fact that it isn't settled is actually maybe a concern?
Well, you obviously, I think, have to pare it down potentially before the first preseason game, August 11th at Indianapolis, if not before, because you're going to go into that game. I mean, Sean Payton played starters last year in the preseason. I imagine he's going to play some too. So, maybe Stidham, because he's the veteran, starts that game, and he and Nix play the first half, and then Wilson just does the mop-up type duty late in the game. So I think if we don't have a pretty good idea of what's going on before that game, I think we'll definitely know more when that game takes place.
So now as we get into the second year of Sean Payton's organization with you, where he really runs the show, the Broncos really stem to stern. This time last year compared to right now, how much more comfortable, in control does Sean Payton look? The roster turnover has been significant, obviously moving on from Russell Wilson. This is now Sean Payton's team. I think clearly the Bo Nix edition really redefines that for him. Is there an expectation with Payton that something will be different this year than last year, or do you expect more of the same?
Well, I think there's a definite comfort level, and this is becoming Payton's team. I counted it up last week. Of the 91 players on the roster entering training camp, 91 because Thomas Yasmin, the Australian import, doesn't count against the 90. 60 were inherited after Sean Payton arrived. So 2/3 of the players are Payton players, and then when it gets to 53, we'll see if the percentage is what it is. If it's, probably still be around 2/3, because some of those players that are still around are around because they're decent players. But Payton last week said something interesting. He thought he knows the personnel better heading into this training camp, because last year he hadn't seen these guys in pads, and now he's seen these guys for a full season in pads and has much more of an idea of how a player is in pads versus last year. Maybe got excited by somebody, and then it was fool's gold once he saw him in pads. So, I think he's definitely more comfortable this year.
The idea of what success is for the Denver Broncos, I don't believe this is a playoff team. I think that has to do with the Broncos themselves, their youth, what they're turning over, and, of course, the tremendous depth in the AFC. I don't think they're a playoff team. I don't even think they're going to get to 8 wins. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they might not be going in the right direction for a Broncos team that for years has just kind of been stuck in neutral and not figuring out a direction in which to go. Is this one of those years under Sean Payton where the idea is don't tread water, pick a direction, any direction, and start swimming?
Yeah, I think the fans don't expect that they're going to make the playoffs this year. I mean, they obviously don't want to see an embarrassing record.
But you get a honeymoon period with a new quarterback, assuming Nix starts.
Yeah, that's what I was getting to. If Nix, you don't want to go 3-14 or 4-13 probably, but let's say they win 5 or 6 games and Nix shows signs that he can be the guy. I mean, that's going to be the key. If Nix shows that he has promise, and then that's going to really ramp up expectations. What can Nix do in a second year? But let's say Stidham ends up being the starter most of the year, or Nix starts and really is very unimpressive. That's going to really hamper things. And then you go into next year's draft, and it's like,
now you need a quarterback all over again.
Yeah, you're going to do like the Arizona Cardinals did with Josh Rosen. Well, I guess he's not our guy, and Kyler Murray's our guy, that sort of thing. They made the right decision, obviously, but it's not a decision you don't want to. It's a decision you don't want to have to ponder in year 2, taking a quarterback consecutive years.
Last one for you. With Papenza out on today, the idea of the Broncos offense obviously getting better is obviously very important. It was a subpar offense at best. It couldn't generate consistent grounds on the ground or in the air. But the defense, there is sort of this odd little presumption that, the defense is good. There are actually a lot of positions that are up for grabs on this defense. There's a lot of competition. I can see a scenario in which the Broncos defense is pretty good, but right now, fans shouldn't assume this is some sort of top 10 defense. There are a lot of question marks, specifically who's going to start opposite Pat Surtain. What do you do in a safety room where injuries are already taking effect? And you moved on from Justin Simmons. You have a collection of edge rushers, but on the inside, you have Alex Singleton and who knows. How much of this defense do you look at today and say, these are the questions that still need to be answered?
Yeah, you took a step back at safety, definitely with Justin Simmons leaving because he still had a good bit in the tank. And then Josie Jewell leaves at inside linebacker, and he provided valuable experience. So arguments can be made that at those two positions, they'll be weaker. But on the defensive line, they really helped themselves.
Yeah.
I thought John Franklin Myers was a great acquisition, and Malcolm Roach, I think, is a versatile guy who can maybe be the first defensive lineman off the bench in the rotation. So they improved the defensive line, and then maybe you can make an argument that they're better at cornerback from the standpoint that Levi Wallace has looked pretty darn good. And he
picked off Bo Nix this weekend.
Yeah, Sean Payton raved about him the other day, and so did Pat Surtain. So he might be an upgrade at the other cornerback spot over Fabian Moreau, who was unsigned as a free agent and hasn't even joined another team yet, not even on a minimum deal. So that's, and so not as good at safety and inside linebacker, the same probably at outside linebacker, better in the defensive line, maybe better at cornerback. So we'll see if it translates overall to being better, but at least they finished last year a lot stronger than giving up 70 points in week 3 at Miami.
Yeah, nowhere to go but up, obviously, when you talk about it there. The Broncos have pads on at camp, so some of those competitions, especially on the defense, could really begin in earnest as it gets a little closer to what you would expect for NFL football level. Chris Tomasson with the Denver Gazette. Check out everything that, of course, he's putting together, writing over there, doing a terrific job being here every single day. Long-time NFL writer, great NBA writer. Sometimes that gets swept under the table when you're out here. People forget about it. Chris is as good as it gets covering basketball, too. So make sure you give him a follow and take care of that. Get all the latest and greatest news from Chris and everyone at the Denver Gazette. Really appreciate the time. I know you have some things to attend to, so I appreciate you dropping in and spending some time with us. Thanks.
Yeah, enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.